The station drifted in silence long before anyone realized something was wrong. It was a research station, old by frontier standards but still reliable. It hung at the edge of mapped space, far from busy trade lanes, where stars were thinner and darker. Inside, the lights were soft and steady, the kind meant to calm minds that worked long hours. Most of the crew were asleep. A few machines hummed quietly, measuring things no one on Earth would ever think about. Eli Harper was awake. He sat alone in the system's bay, legs pulled close, tablet resting on his knees. He was not supposed to be on shift, but sleep had refused him. The stars outside the wide observation window looked wrong tonight. Not broken, not dangerous, just wrong. They seemed slightly stretched, as if the universe had taken a breath and forgotten to let it out. Eli frowned and ran another diagnostic. Numbers scrolled by, all green, all normal. That somehow made the tight feeling in his chest worse. Then the alarms stopped. They did not blare or scream. They simply went quiet. The soft background chimes that marked time cycles vanished. The low hum of the gravity stabilizers dipped for half a second and returned weaker. Eli looked up sharply. "What?" he whispered, though no one was there. He stood and took a step forward and nearly fell. Gravity shifted, not enough to throw him, but enough to make his stomach turn. The stars outside the window flickered, like reflections on disturbed water. Eli's tablet flashed red. Spatial DESYNC event. His breath caught. That was not possible. Desync events were theoretical, simulated in labs, never observed at this scale. The lights dimmed. Somewhere far away, metal creaked. Eli ran. He moved through the corridor, boots hitting the floor harder than they should. Doors stood open, emergency seals half engaged, as if the station itself could not decide what state it was in. He called out names, but the sound felt swallowed, thin and weak. He reached the central hub. That was where he saw the envoy. The being stood near the main viewport, perfectly still. It was tall and slender, its form wrapped in layered containment fields that shimmered faintly like heat above stone. Inside those fields, soft bands of light moved slowly, changing color in calm patterns. The alien turned. Eli stopped. They had met before, of course. The envoy had been on the station for months, observing, learning. Its species did not use spoken language the way humans did. Communication usually went through complex translators, projecting symbols and tones into the human mind. Now the translator unit at the envoy's side was dark. The alien's light shifted, faster now, tighter bands of pale blue and white. Something was wrong. Eli opened his mouth to speak, then froze as another wave passed through the station. The viewport rippled. Stars stretched into thin lines, then snapped back. A voice finally came from the station systems, weak and distorted. "Warning, station integrity compromised, external reference lost." Eli felt cold. Lost from what? He looked at the envoy again. Without translation, he could not hear its words, but he could see urgency in the way the light pulsed. The alien raised one elongated limb and pointed toward the control ring. Eli nodded without thinking. He did not know why he trusted the gesture, only that it felt right. They moved together. At the control ring, chaos reigned quietly. Screens showed frozen star maps, coordinates that led nowhere. Rescue beacons showed active, but no confirmation pings returned. Eli's fingers flew across the console. Okay, we're still here," he muttered, more to himself than to the envoy. "We're just off-grid, that's all." The envoy leaned closer, light shifting to a deep amber. Eli did not know what it meant, but it felt like concern. "Life support," Eli checked quickly. "Green." Power levels, reduced but stable. Structural integrity, holding for now. Crew status made his throat tighten. No signals, no readings. It was as if everyone else had been erased between 1 second and the next. Eli swallowed hard. "It's just us," he said quietly. The envoy seemed to understand the weight of those words, even without sound. Its light dimmed slightly, then steadied. Slowly, deliberately, it lowered itself to a seated position opposite Eli, mirroring his posture. That simple act broke something in him. Eli exhaled shakily and sat too back against the console. The station felt enormous and empty all at once. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time was strange here. The clock still ticked, but Eli did not trust them. Finally, he forced himself to focus. Okay. He glanced at the envoy, then back at the screens. We find out where we are, or what where even means right now. He pulled up sensor data. External scans returned nothing useful, just noise, warped readings that twisted in on themselves. The envoy watched him closely. Its light pattern slowed, then shifted into repeating pulses. It raised one limb again and traced a shape in the air. The containment field glowed brighter where it passed, leaving a brief trail. A loop, a fold. Eli stared. You're saying we're folded? Like space bent around us. The alien tilted its head slightly. The light brightened once, then dimmed. A yes, maybe. Eli let out a breathy laugh. Of course we are. He rubbed his face. Panic pressed at the edges of his mind, but he pushed it back. Panic would not help. He had learned that long ago. He looked at the envoy again, really looked this time. Without words, without data readouts, he had to rely on instinct, on observation. The alien's lights changed when the station shifted, tightened when systems dipped, softened when stability returned. You're feeling this too, Eli said softly. The station, I mean. The envoy's light pulsed once, warm and steady. That was enough. Hours passed like that. They worked side by side in silence, checking systems, rerouting power, stabilizing what they could. Sometimes Eli would glance up and catch the envoy watching him, light gently swirling. Sometimes the envoy would pause, its attention fully on Eli, as if measuring something deeper than motion. There was no fear in those moments, just awareness. Eventually, exhaustion crept in. Eli's hands shook as he set down his tablet. We should rest, he said, though he was not sure why he bothered speaking aloud. Shifts, even if it's just us. The envoy considered this, then nodded slowly. They moved to the habitation ring. Empty rooms lined the corridor, doors half open, personal items left behind. Eli avoided looking too closely. It hurt too much. They chose a small observation lounge. One wall was transparent, showing the strange, stretched stars outside. The light there was dim, calm. Eli sat on one of the couches and stared out. I don't know if anyone can find us, he admitted quietly. If we're really out of normal space, he trailed off. The envoy stood nearby, then slowly lowered itself to the floor, folding its limbs carefully. Its light shifted to a deep, steady gold. It did not reach out, its species rarely did, but it angled its body toward Eli, fully present. Eli felt something loosen in his chest. Yeah, he murmured. I know, one problem at a time. They sat like that for a long while. At some point, Eli realized he was being watched again. He turned his head and met the envoy's gaze, if it could be called that. Within the containment field, the light gathered, focused. For a moment, the station creaked softly, a reminder of their fragile situation. Eli did not look away. In that quiet, something passed between them. Not words, not data, just understanding. They were trapped. But they were not alone. The station did not feel the same when Eli woke up. He opened his eyes slowly, unsure at first where he was. The observation lounge lights were dimmed to night cycle levels, but the stars beyond the transparent wall glowed in strange colors, stretched and curved like brushstrokes. For a moment, he wondered if he was still dreaming. Then he remembered. The desync. The silence. Everyone else gone. Eli pushed himself upright, joints stiff from sleeping in an unfamiliar position. He checked his tablet, heart lifting slightly when it powered on without trouble. Time readouts were still running, though they lagged by fractions of a second, numbers correcting themselves again and again. He was not alone. The envoy was still there. It rested near the viewport, lights dim and slow, almost like breathing. Its presence filled the room in a quiet way, not heavy, not threatening. Just there. Eli stood carefully, trying not to startle it. He did not know if its species even startled the way humans did, but he had learned already that respect mattered. "I'm going to check systems again," he said softly, more out of habit than necessity. The envoy's light brightened slightly, then settled. Approval, maybe. Eli left the lounge and moved through the corridor. The station was still stable, but small changes had appeared overnight. Temperature fluctuations. Power draw spikes with no clear source. Space itself seemed to tug at the station, testing it. In the central hub, Eli pulled up deeper scans. External sensors still returned mostly noise, but patterns were forming within that noise. Repeating waves. Slow pulses, he frowned. That wasn't there before. Behind him, a soft hum filled the air. He turned. The envoy had followed, light patterns flowing faster now, curious. It raised one limb and angled it toward the display. Eli adjusted the view. The envoy traced another shape in the air, more complex this time. Layers, motion. "You're saying it's changing," Eli guessed. "Whatever space we're in." The light pulsed once. "Yes. That's not great." Eli rubbed his forehead. "But maybe not bad either." He leaned closer to the screen. "If it's changing, then it's not static, which means maybe we're not stuck forever." The envoy's light shifted to a brighter shade, almost white at the center. Hope, maybe, or agreement. They worked for hours after that. Without words, they developed a rhythm. Eli adjusted systems, tested theories, ran simulations. The envoy observed patterns beyond human sensors, responding to shifts Eli could not feel. Sometimes it would alert him by standing suddenly, light flaring sharp and fast. Other times it would settle closer, light smoothing, signaling stability. Eli started to notice small details. When the envoy was curious, its light leaned toward green. When focused, blue-white dominated. When uncertain, faint flickers of violet appeared at the edges. He did not know if those meanings were true, but they felt right. At one point, Eli made a mistake. He rerouted power too quickly, overcorrecting a fluctuation. The station shuddered. Lights dimmed. For a terrifying second, gravity weakened enough to make his stomach drop. Eli froze. "I'm sorry," he said automatically, heart pounding. The envoy moved instantly. It stepped forward, placing itself between Eli and the console, limbs spreading slightly. Its light flared bright gold, steady and strong. The station stabilized. Eli stared, breath shallow. "You buffered it," he said. "You absorbed the spike." The envoy's light dimmed slowly, as if releasing tension. It turned back to him, light softening. Eli laughed, shaky and breathless. "Okay, noted. You're better at this part than I am." He sank into a chair, hands trembling now that the danger had passed. He waited for fear to fully hit him. It didn't. Instead, something else settled in his chest. Trust. That realization startled him more than the station's instability ever could. Later, while systems ran on monitoring cycles, Eli found himself in the small food prep area. Supplies were limited but still plentiful enough for weeks, maybe months. He heated a simple ration, the smell faint but comforting. He paused, then grabbed a second pack. Back in the hub, he sat on the floor near the viewport and opened the ration. He ate slowly, then pushed the second pack gently across the floor toward the envoy. "I don't know if you can eat this," he said, feeling a little foolish. But it felt wrong not to offer. The envoy looked down at the pack. Its light shifted, rippling with rapid color changes Eli had never seen before. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. Carefully, it reached out with one limb and touched the ration. The packaging crinkled softly. The envoy withdrew its limb, light settling into a warm, steady glow. It did not eat, but it did not push the pack away either. Eli smiled faintly. "That's okay." As time passed, small habits formed. Eli spoke aloud when he worked, explaining what he was doing even though he knew the envoy might not understand the words. The envoy listened anyway, light pulsing gently, attentive. In return, the envoy began making more deliberate light patterns, slower and clearer, as if trying to be understood. Eli watched closely, learning. One cycle, while monitoring the external field, Eli noticed the envoy's light dim suddenly. Not gradually. Suddenly. He turned, alarmed. "Hey, what's wrong?" The envoy swayed slightly. The station around them hummed louder, power draw increasing. Eli checked readings. "Your energy output is spiking. You're stabilizing the field again, aren't you?" The envoy's light flickered weakly. Eli stood fast. "Stop, please, you can't keep doing that alone." The alien did not stop. Eli's chest tightened. He rushed to the console, rerouting power manually, forcing the station to take more of the load. Warning lights flashed, but he ignored them, teeth clenched. "Share it," he muttered. "Just share it." Slowly, the envoy's light steadied. The station stopped shaking. Eli slumped against the console, breathing hard. They stayed like that for a long time, neither moving. When Eli finally looked up, he found the envoy watching him closely. Its light gathered, focused, bright at the center. Eli met its gaze. "I won't let you carry this alone," he said quietly. "I don't care what the odds are." The envoy's light warmed, spreading outward in soft waves. Acceptance. From that moment, something shifted between them. They were no longer just survivors sharing space. They were partners. Days, or what passed for days, blurred together. The strange space around the station continued to change, patterns growing more complex. Eli began to suspect they were drifting, not randomly, but along some unseen current. He tried mapping it. The envoy helped, marking moments when the external pressure eased or intensified. Together, they built a rough understanding of their situation. They were not outside the universe, they were between frames of it. "Like being stuck between pages," Eli murmured one cycle, staring at the warped stars. "The story keeps going, just not where we are." The envoy's light pulsed thoughtfully. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He returned to the observation lounge, sat with his back against the wall, and watched the stars twist slowly. The envoy joined him without sound. For a while, neither of them did anything. No work, no monitoring, just existing. Eli finally spoke. "Back home, people think humans survive because we're tough, because we fight." He shook his head slightly. "That's not it. We survive because we hold on, to ideas, to people, to moments like this." He did not know if the envoy understood the words. But when he glanced sideways, he saw the light beside him glow brighter, warmer, steady as a heartbeat. And for the first time since the station fell silent, Eli felt something close to peace. The change came quietly. Eli noticed it first in the numbers. Power levels dipped a little faster than before. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to make him uneasy. He ran the calculations again, slower this time, checking every assumption. The result did not change. He sat back in his chair, tablet resting heavy in his hands. His mouth felt dry. Across the room, the envoy was still, light moving in slow, thoughtful waves. It sensed Eli's shift in mood almost immediately. The soft gold tones faded, replaced by cooler blues. Eli looked up. He hesitated, then turned the tablet so the envoy could see the display. "We have a problem," he said quietly. The envoy leaned closer. Its light sharpened, focusing on the scrolling data. Eli pointed. "The station can't sustain both of us indefinitely. Not at the level we're operating now. The field around us is demanding more, every cycle." The envoy's light dimmed slightly. "I'm still working on solutions," Eli added quickly. This isn't the end, but we need to be honest about where we stand." The envoy was silent for a long moment. Then slowly it straightened. Its light shifted into a pattern Eli had never seen before, tight, deliberate pulses, evenly spaced. Eli frowned. "What are you?" The envoy moved. It crossed the room and reached the secondary power console. Before Eli could react, it began adjusting energy flow, rerouting power away from its own containment systems. "No," Eli said sharply, jumping to his feet. "Stop! Don't!" The envoy did not stop. Warnings flashed across the console. Containment stability dropped by a fraction. Eli rushed forward and overrode the changes, forcing power back into the Envoy systems. "Absolutely not," he said, voice tight. "We are not doing this." The Envoy turned toward him. Its light flared bright, almost white, intense enough to reflect off the metal walls. Eli froze. He had never seen it like that before. Not angry exactly, but firm, certain. Slowly, deliberately, the Envoy reversed Eli's override. Power shifted again. Eli felt his chest tighten. "You think I'm going to let you fade just so I can sit here alone?" he demanded. "That's not happening." The Envoy stepped closer. Its light softened just a little, then pulsed once. It raised a limb and pointed at the power graph, then at Eli, then back at itself. Understanding hit Eli like a weight. "You're saying if one of us draws less power, the other lasts longer." The Envoy's light pulsed once. "Yes." Eli shook his head hard. No, that's not a solution. That's just choosing who gets left behind." The Envoy's light shifted, slow and calm. It reached out and gently touched the floor between them, then itself, then Eli. "Here, you, me." Then it made a slow slicing motion through the air. "Choice." Eli's throat tightened. "You don't get to decide that alone." The Envoy tilted its head. Its light softened further, warm and steady. It was not arguing, it was offering. That made it worse. Eli turned away, hands clenched. He stared out at the warped stars, trying to steady his breathing. "This is how it always goes," he muttered. "Numbers say one thing. People expect you to accept it." He turned back. "I won't." Time passed, heavy and tense. The station creaked softly as space pressed against it. Power levels continued their slow decline, indifferent to the standoff happening inside. Eventually, Eli sat down hard on the floor, exhaustion finally catching up with him. He buried his face in his hands. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted, "but I do know one thing." He looked up at the Envoy again, eyes tired but steady. "I won't survive by letting someone else disappear. That's not survival, that's just existing." The Envoy watched him closely. Its light shifted through subtle colors, unreadable. Then slowly, it did something unexpected. It restored the power routing to its containment system. Eli's breath caught. You're backing off." The Envoy's light pulsed gently. Not surrender, compromise. It moved to the console again, this time adjusting a different parameter. It rerouted power not away from itself but away from non-essential station systems. Comfort lighting, environmental buffers, redundancies meant for a full crew. The station lights dimmed slightly. Temperature dropped by a fraction. Eli stared. "You're cutting both of us equally." The Envoy's light warmed. Eli let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, that I can work with." From then on, everything changed. They stripped the station down to what truly mattered. Life support, structural integrity, minimal power to research systems. Everything else was negotiable. Days grew colder. Eli layered clothes, breath sometimes fogging faintly in the air. The Envoy adjusted its containment field, lights dimmer now but still stable. Neither complained. Instead, they adapted. Eli became more careful, moving slowly, conserving energy. The Envoy took on more observation work, alerting Eli before fluctuations became dangerous, reducing the need for emergency responses. The balance was fragile, but it held. One cycle, as Eli reviewed long-range data, something caught his eye. A pattern in the noise, not strong, not clear, but consistent. He leaned closer, heart picking up speed. Wait, that wasn't there before. The Envoy moved beside him, light sharpening. Eli magnified the signal. "It's weak, but it's repeating, like an echo." The Envoy traced a shape in the air, a pulse, a return. "Are you saying it's reflecting off something?" Eli asked. The Envoy's light pulsed once. "Yes." Eli's mind raced. "If there's something out there that can reflect signals, then maybe there's a boundary, an edge we can interact with." Hope stirred, fragile but real. But as they worked to amplify the signal, the power graph dipped further. Eli's smile faded. "We don't have much margin left." The envoy looked at the graph. Its light dimmed. That night Eli lay awake in the observation lounge, staring at the twisted stars. His body ached from cold and fatigue. His thoughts would not settle. Across the room the envoy was still, light slow and low. Eli sat up. "You awake?" he asked quietly. The envoy's light pulsed faintly. Eli hesitated, then spoke again. "Back on Earth we tell stories about first contact, about humans proving themselves, being brave, being clever." He laughed softly. "Nobody talks about this part. About what you do when there's no winning move." He looked at the envoy. "If it comes down to it and there really is no other option." He stopped himself, shook his head. "No, I won't finish that sentence." The envoy stood and moved closer. It lowered itself beside Eli, closer than it ever had before. Its light was dim but steady. Eli felt warmth, not physical but something deeper. "I don't know how your people see us," he said, "but this refusal to let go, that's who we are." The envoy's light pulsed slowly, thoughtfully. Outside, the stars twisted and shifted, indifferent to their quiet moment. But inside the station, something stronger than logic held firm. They would face whatever came next together. And neither of them would accept a future that required the other to vanish. The signal did not come from outside. Eli realized that slowly, after hours of staring at the same data until his eyes burned. The pattern they had found was real, but it was not moving the way an external object would. It was not drifting past the station or reflecting from a distant boundary. It was circling them. He leaned back, rubbing his face with cold hands. "It's not a wall," he murmured. "It's more like a current." The envoy stood nearby, light dim but attentive. At Eli's words, its glow shifted, forming a slow spiral pattern. "Yes," Eli said quietly, encouraged. "Exactly that." The strange space around them was not empty and it was not solid. It flowed. And the station, broken and displaced, was caught inside it like debris in deep water. That changed everything. Eli stood and began pacing, mind racing despite his exhaustion. "If it's a current, then brute force won't help. Pushing harder won't get us out. We need to align with it." The envoy's light brightened slightly. "But we don't have engines strong enough," Eli continued. "And even if we did, we don't know where out actually is." He stopped pacing and looked at the envoy. Unless we don't try to leave." The envoy tilted its head. Eli swallowed. "What if we let the current take us somewhere detectable?" He pulled up long-range scans again. "If this current brushes against normal space at any point, just barely, we might be able to make ourselves visible, not by force, by resonance." The envoy's light began to pulse faster, curious. Eli's hands trembled slightly as he worked. "The problem is our signal." He pointed to the data. "Standard beacons aren't working. They're too clean, too predictable. They get smoothed out by whatever this space is." The envoy's light flickered thoughtfully. Eli laughed softly, almost bitter. "Figures. The universe doesn't notice perfect signals." He looked at the envoy again, eyes tired but sharp. "But it does notice noise." The envoy's light sharpened, bright at the center. Eli felt a strange excitement build in his chest. Not random noise, patterned noise, messy, uneven, something that doesn't belong. He pulled up a new model, overlaying human neural rhythms over the station's output. Brainwave patterns, emotional response curves, decision-making spikes. The envoy watched closely as the display filled with chaotic, overlapping waves. "This is how humans think," Eli said quietly. "We're inconsistent, we hesitate, we doubt, we hope. Our signals are full of contradictions." He hesitated, then added, "Machines hate that." The envoy's light rippled, colors shifting rapidly. "And you," Eli said, turning fully toward it, "you don't communicate in words. You communicate in states, energy, presence." The envoy's light pulsed once. "What if we combine that?" Eli said, voice growing steadier. "Not a message that says help us, but a signal that says someone is here. The envoy moved closer, light brightening with interest. They began immediately. Eli rerouted the station's output channels, deliberately introducing irregular delays. He removed smoothing algorithms, allowed fluctuations to remain. He fed in biometric data, not live scans but archived patterns of human emotional response. Heart rate spikes, stress curves, calm plateaus. The envoy stood at the center of the hub, containment field shimmering. Slowly, carefully, it adjusted its own energy emissions, syncing them not to the station's systems but to Eli himself. When Eli's focus sharpened, the light intensified. When doubt crept in, faint violet appeared. When hope rose, gold spread softly. Eli noticed it only after several minutes. He stopped typing. You're following me," he whispered. The envoy's light pulsed gently. Eli swallowed hard. That's dangerous for you." The envoy's light shifted, firm but calm, shared risk. Eli closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were steady. "Okay," he said. "Then we do this together." The signal grew, not stronger but stranger. The station began to hum differently, vibrations uneven and complex. The warp stars outside responded, their stretching patterns flickering in time with the signal. Eli's heart pounded. "It's working," he breathed. "Something's reacting." Power levels dipped dangerously. Warnings flashed. Eli ignored them. "Hold steady," he said aloud, not sure if he was speaking to the station or the envoy or himself. The envoy's light flared bright, then steadied, containment field tightening. It was pushing hard now, translating emotion into energy, presence into pattern. Eli's hands shook as he made final adjustments. "We can't sustain this long," he said, just long enough to be noticed." The station shuddered. Gravity wavered. Eli stumbled, catching himself on the console. "Easy," he muttered. "Easy." The envoy shifted closer instinctively, light wrapping the space between them in a steady glow. Then suddenly the noise changed. The chaotic pattern they had created echoed. Eli froze. Did you see that?" The envoy's light pulsed sharply. The echo came again. Weak but unmistakable, a response. Eli laughed, breathless and disbelieving. Someone's out there, they felt it. The echo did not resolve into words or signals. It was just a disturbance, a ripple brushing against theirs, but it was enough. Power levels plunged. The station lights dimmed to emergency minimums. Temperature dropped sharply. Eli's smile faded as he checked the readings. "We're out of margin," he said quietly. "If we keep this up." He did not finish the sentence. The envoy knew. Its light dimmed, flickering faintly now. Eli stared at the console, mind racing. "We need to hold the signal, but not like this." He looked at the envoy. "You can't keep matching my state. It's draining you too fast." The envoy's light pulsed weakly, refusing to disengage. Eli shook his head. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "This is the part where humans do something stupid." He shut down half the output channels. Warnings screamed silently across the screen. The envoy's light flared in alarm. "Trust me," Eli said, voice steady despite the chaos. "If this works, it'll be because it makes no sense." He took a deep breath. Then he did something no protocol allowed. He opened the station's internal logs, not the technical ones, the personal ones, recorded thoughts, reflections. Messages crew members had left for family never sent. Notes written in loneliness, in boredom, in quiet hope. Eli rooted them into the signal, not the words themselves, but the emotional weight behind them. The uneven rhythms of human thought at rest. Longing, humor, fear, love. The envoy froze, light flickering wildly as it absorbed the sudden change. Eli felt tears sting his eyes. "This is who we are," he whispered. "Not clean, not efficient, but real." The signal bloomed. Outside, the warped stars flared bright, stretching further than before. Space around the station rippled violently. The echo returned, stronger this time. Power levels crashed. Containment stability dropped. The envoy staggered. Eli ran to it without thinking, grabbing a railing to steady himself as gravity shifted. "Hey, stay with me," he said urgently. The envoy's light dimmed to a faint glow, barely holding shape. Eli slammed his hand onto the console, shutting down the signal completely. Silence fell. The station drifted, cold and dark. For a long moment, nothing happened. Eli knelt beside the envoy, breath coming in shallow gasps. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I pushed too far." Slowly, painfully slowly, the envoy's light began to brighten again. Dim gold replaced the fading white. Eli sagged with relief, resting his forehead against the cool metal floor. They had risked everything. And somewhere beyond the strange current, something had noticed. The universe had not answered yet. But it had looked back. The station drifted in quiet darkness after the signal ended. Eli stayed where he was on the floor for a long time, one hand resting against the cool metal, the other close to the envoy's containment field. He did not touch it. He did not need to. The faint gold light inside told him enough. Alive, still here. The station system slowly stabilized at their lowest safe levels. Emergency lights returned, weak but steady. Gravity settled into a gentle pull again, lighter than before but consistent. Eli finally pushed himself up, joints aching. He checked the console with tired eyes. Power reserves were low, very low, but not gone. "We bought time," he said softly, though his voice cracked. "I don't know how much." The envoy's light pulsed once, dim but warm. They moved slowly after that. Every action was careful, measured. No sudden changes, no risks. They let the station drift with the current instead of fighting it. Outside the viewport, the warped stars shifted again. This time, the change was different. Eli noticed it while reviewing sensor data. The noise patterns around the station were thinning, stretching in one direction more than others, like fabric being gently pulled. He leaned closer to the display. "Wait!" The envoy moved beside him, light sharpening with focus. The current was no longer circling. It was carrying them. Eli's heart beat faster. "We're moving," he said, "not randomly, along a gradient." The envoy traced a slow line in the air, then a widening shape. "Yeah," Eli breathed. "Towards somewhere." They waited. Minutes passed. Then hours. The station creaked softly as pressure shifted, but it held. The stars outside slowly began to lose their stretched shapes. Lines softened into points. Colors returned to familiar patterns. Eli's breath caught. That's normal space." The envoy's light brightened for the first time in what felt like ages. The transition was not sudden. It was like waking from a deep sleep. Sensors flickered, recalibrating. External references slowly came back online. Then, a ping. Eli froze. Another ping followed, clearer this time. External contact detected. Eli stared at the screen, not trusting it. His hands hovered over the console, afraid to move. The envoy's light flared bright gold. "Someone found us," Eli whispered. He opened the channel, routing minimal power, heart pounding. "This is Research Station Helios 9, he said, voice unsteady but clear. We've been displaced. If you can hear this." The reply came almost immediately, crackling with static but unmistakably human. "Helios 9, this is Recovery Vessel Dawnpath. We have you on partial lock. Signal is unstable, but we see you." Eli laughed, a sound halfway to a sob. He pressed his forehead against the console. "We see you too," he managed. The envoy stood very still, light steady and bright, containment field humming softly. The docking process took hours. The space around the station was still fragile, and every adjustment had to be slow. Eli stayed at the controls the entire time, guiding the process with shaking hands. When the first rescue team finally crossed into the station, their boots echoing in the corridor, Eli almost forgot how to speak. They stared at the empty halls, at the stripped-down systems, at the quiet cold. And then they saw the envoy. Weapons were not raised. No alarm sounded. There was only stunned silence. Eli stepped forward immediately, placing himself between the team and the envoy without thinking. "It's with me," he said firmly. "It saved this station." The envoy's light dimmed slightly, calm but alert. The rescue team leader nodded slowly. "Understood," Eli exhaled. The separation came later, after medical checks, after debriefs, after warm food and blankets and a long, quiet moment where Eli finally slept without dreaming. The envoy was transferred to a specialized containment chamber aboard the Dawn Path, its light still visible through layered shielding. Eli stood outside the chamber, hands in his pockets, unsure what to say. The envoy turned toward him, light gathering at its center. Eli swallowed. "I don't know what happens next," he said, "for either of us." The light pulsed gently. "They're going to ask questions," Eli continued, "about what you did, about how you stabilized the field, about the signal." The envoy's light shifted, thoughtful. Eli smiled faintly. "Yeah, I know you don't mind." He hesitated, then added, "They're going to change how they think about first contact, about cooperation." The envoy's light warmed. Eli stepped closer to the chamber wall. "You should know something," he said quietly. "Back there when you tried to give up power for me," he shook his head. "Humans don't see survival that way, not really. We don't measure it by who lasts the longest. We measure it by who we refuse to leave behind." The envoy's light brightened, steady and deep. For a long moment they simply looked at each other. No words, no translators, just understanding. Later, reports would be written. Scientists would argue over data, over equations that describe the strange space between frames of reality. Engineers would study the signal, baffled by its inefficiency and power. Philosophers would debate why it worked at all. And the alien civilization would change its models of intelligence. Not because humans were stronger, not because they were smarter, but because, when faced with a choice that demanded sacrifice, humans rejected the premise. Eli Harper would return home eventually. He would walk under open skies again, breathe air that did not hum with machinery, feel gravity that did not waver. But sometimes, when he looked up at the stars, he would remember a quiet station, twisted space, and a presence beside him that did not speak, yet understood everything. And he would smile. Because in the vast silence of the universe, humanity had answered the void not with force, but with connection.